Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Command Point. My name's Ryan, and today I'm here with my co-host Shane, as always. Shane, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. So today we're going to be talking about the uh, top 5 factions that we think are going to go pretty deep in the Bay Area Tournament Simulator.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of time now to kind of pile over the BAO packet, and I think there's some factions that are clearly a little bit stronger than others on the packet, and I think there's some that we need to look out for. So I think it's an interesting conversation to have right before we get into the tournament.
Yeah, for sure. So, in these are in no particular order because I think for most of these factions it's pretty much a toss-up.
So yeah, I mean, like you said, Ryan, these are basically not going to be in any particular order. I'd say with a few exceptions. Before we get into the actual, I guess, quote unquote list, um, honorable mention to one faction that for me didn't quite make this list, but I think is worth looking out for, and that's Thousand Sons. Don't want to talk about them too much, but from what I've seen, they're kind of scary on this packet too. But getting into the list, I guess this would be my. I said that these aren't really in any particular order, but if they weren't in order, this would be my 5, and that's Asuryani. So obviously, Ryan Asuryani is historically quite good in just about any kill team tournament packet that we've seen.
Yeah, for sure. The fact that we have them on this list, and I personally think that they are weakest on arena like type format, is it just really illustrates how strong of a faction Asuryani is, just across kill team in general. So obviously with Asuryani, what makes them special is they have a couple neat high damage weapons with like great shooting, but they also have fantastic movement and a lot of shenanigans that they can do in like action economy to kind of drag that out and just kind of just totally abuse the movement phase or even move outside of the movement phase.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely kind of like an unknown factor. We haven't heard a lot of people talking about them for BAO.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're just so good of a faction in general that it should be talked about.
Yeah. So the fact that, like as I was saying earlier, like the just all their movement shenanigans, the fact that with BAO, all of the doors start open in this format is a tremendous advantage for them during that turn 1 movement phase. Same thing applies to other factions that we'll get into later on. But the other strength that I found pretty intriguing about them is just their variety of Exarchs, just like the Exarch models. So the Dire Avenger Exarch, the Banshee Exarch, and the Striking Scorpion Exarch are all very good models, very good point efficient models, and this faction can also bring other models like Defender Gunners, I think, with their
Storm
flamers.
Guardian, the Storm Guardian Gunners. Yeah, those are pretty good.
Yeah. And what as well as the slightly controversial choice of the Wraith Blade, not the Wraith Guard, the Wraith Blade.
Yeah, I personally think
Yeah,
both of them can be really good on this packet. The Wraith Guard with the D scythe can really like plug up areas. It's like a mega flamer. But I do think that if there's ever an avenue to use a Wraith Blade, it would be in the arena format.
For sure.
It's a steep cost, but I've experimented a little bit with it on the packet, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's a toughness 6 model with a 4-up invuln and 3 wounds is really hard to take care of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, underrated melee strength, Asuryani, just really good movement. I think that's enough to put them on a list like this.
Yeah. Do you think that Althway would still be the strongest sub-faction for any Asuryani players to take, or is there another one that we haven't really looked at?
I mean, I like Bieltan, but I think here, I think Ulthway is all right. I thought about the one where you reroll charges, but I just don't think there's enough value in it comparatively. I mean, I was just talking about how tanky that Wraith Guard is, or that Wraith Blade. I mean, you throw a 6 up feel no pain on top of those 3 wounds, it's even harder to take it out. So
yeah.
I guess probably moving on now. The next one that I wanted to talk about here was Heretic Astartes.
Yeah.
These guys are melee monsters when it comes to, especially on Arena.
Oh, yeah.
The way that the Khorne Berserkers can just kind of dominate the game and just get so many opportunities to activate in the fight phase. And yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Shouts out Will Blood. If you want to find out, take a deep dive for how Heretic Astartes play in Arena, go check out our interview with him. But Heretic Astartes, I think they're good on LVO, but I think their strength is just being able to get locked in melee combat, and it's very easy for this type of faction to do, just because of all the line of sight blocking terrain on Arena. And then you take them as Renegade Astartes, and you're going to be re-rolling all those charges after your presumed turn 1 advances, and then you're just locked in combat forever. And then there was a question about how the Berserkers' ability to fight twice works in this packet, because isn't it different in this packet from other tournament packets that we've seen before, or am I thinking of something else?
Yeah, there was a little bit of confusion about how the Berserkers actually operate on BAO. But basically, what you need to know is if a Berserker gets charged, then they can fight, and then when they fight again, their targets are not limited to the model that charged them. They can really, as long as they can pile in and get within an inch of somebody else, they can fight whoever. But if the Berserker charged, even on that second activation, they're still limited to fighting the models that they charged.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a little bit of flexibility there, but just the potential to potentially, fight multiple models that weren't even in combat just through piling in and, wiggling your way within an inch of another model and then whacking them with a Berserker. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, for sure.
And then on top of that, they have some really good gunners. They have the option to kind of flood the board with cultists if the matchup dictates.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of strength for Heretic Astartes on this packet, and I think they're pretty scary going in.
Yeah. All right. Would we like to move on to the next faction?
Yeah. So I guess next up on this list, is the Drukhari, the Dark Eldar.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to say. I think they're kind of like the hot hand at the moment. There's a lot of people playing them.
They're just such a strong faction. They start off with one of their sub factions, and then as the game progresses, they just get more and more sub faction traits, basically from Power from Pain. Just totally game breaking in that aspect. The Mandrake spam is very viable, and I don't want to say Mandrake spam because it's not really spam. It's more like you take roughly 3 or 4 Mandrakes and a Night Fiend or something like that. Pair that along with Zealot Incubi. I feel like everybody that's been watching competitive Kill Team play has kind of seen some iteration of this roster anyways. So not really. The thing about the faction is, I think that their one weakness is that there's really only 3 models that are they're killing strength, you know what I mean? And the way that these secondaries are kind of set up, it's very hard to go 100% positional. So if you're playing Drukhari and you're just getting diced on the injury roll with all of your 1 damage weapons, then it's a grind. It's a grind to try to get back and get established and try to get a point lead if the dice just aren't with you. But I mean, that goes with any faction, honestly, but more so with them, just because they're so limited with their true killing power. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that killing ability is going to be put on the shoulders of, your Clavex, or I guess if you're running Witches, which I think we're going to see a lot more of on this packet than the Cabalites,
Yeah.
then there's a little bit of extra killing power there. But I mean, the Rex, the Prophets of Flesh style, that is not the most killy roster. You're going to have the Akafist, and outside of that, you're really, again, the Mandrakes, yes, they can, kind of dish out a lot of damage, but they're more like utility models. They're these flex models that can kind of go around and do anything. They're not going to be the big scary killing machine that you really need on a roster.
Right. And
there's
even
a potential
the literal
for grotesque.
Yeah, I was about to say, even the big literal killing machine, the grotesque itself, it's Great Cleaver, or whatever that weapon. It's Meat Cleaver. I don't even remember.
Monstrous Cleaver.
Yeah, Monstrous Cleaver. Yeah, that's what it was. It's still only a 1 damage weapon. So I mean, you can buff them up with specialisms and stuff like that to get them up to like 6 attacks or something, hitting on strength 6, with like the Zealot buff or something. But at the end of the day, it's only a 1 damage weapon. So
yeah, it's pretty easy to get tied up there with that like 38 point model. All you need to do is fail that injury roll, and then that's another turn that you're basically stuck.
Or even worse than that, someone just shuts a door in the grotesque face, and the door just stays closed for the rest of the game. And it's only a 4-round game, and if you can't move that grotesque into combat, that's 38 points just sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah. Still though, I would look out for the Coven, Witch Spam, basically. With the Mandrakes and the Clavex, and I would also obviously look out for Prophets of Flesh, because it's still a really strong faction. With a ton of potential.
For sure. Okay.
I guess we can move on to the next one, which is the Adeptus Astartes.
Yeah. So I don't know how deep you want to go into this faction, Shane, but you and I are very high on Astartes right now, especially when it comes to this packet. Something interesting that we should note is that the Salamander like reroll may not work as most people think it would on this packet. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to operate the same exact way as Novak and like the Pauper Princes, the Genestealer cult have, but there is the possibility that I believe rerolls happen after modifiers in this packet. So a 3, for instance, if you're shooting at long range, that's not going to hit. So it's not going to be considered a failed hit roll. So you can't use Salamanders to get a free reroll on that, because it's technically not a failed reroll until after modifiers, which is when the reroll would happen.
Yeah.
So that's something that's affected a lot of factions. But Salamander's subfaction for Astartes is certainly part of it. That being said, there's a lot of other ways to play the Space Marines, and there's a ton of builds that we've been seeing people work with.
I've come up with a White Scars list that's just as many Power Fists and Storm Shields as you can possibly fit into a roster. You've come up with a pretty cool Blood Angels list that is really tailored to doing one thing and one thing only. That's killing toughness 3. And then we've seen like Biranid. He's been talking about running Astartes, and I was practicing a game against him, and he brought out this crazy, everybody has dual plasma pistols on his list. It's just like wild, the amount of plasma damage that he can put out.
I seriously think there's a build for Astartes in here that you could fit onto a 20-man roster that is capable of really handling a lot of these, these in factions, the meta factions, you can say.
Right.
You see a lot of elves running around. You see a lot of like scary stuff like that, and I think the Astartes have an answer to it. And on top of that, there's the whole like possibility, like what we saw with you at the Command Point Invitational, with these Vanguard guys with storm shields running around, just unkillable. Like that we throw Death Denied. And another thing on top of that with Death Denied is with Arena, it's pretty easy for there to not be a lot of action turn 1. And this really works into Astartes' favor, because if there's not action turn 1, then you're going into turn 2, chances are, with 3, possibly 4 CP, which gives you a lot more freedom to play aggro, because you can rely not only on that Storm Shield, but potentially on Death Denied as well, if need be.
Yeah, for sure. And then also now, after the annual came out and everything, and Astartes got the Battle Brothers tactic, that's another cheaper alternative to keeping a single wound model alive by placing a mortal wound onto a Primaris model or something else that's nearby to it. So just another way to keep your models alive, basically. And it's I've played using these sorts of rosters and playing against these sorts of rosters. They are very, very good. I think Astartes can. I think they're my favorite going into this, honestly.
Yeah, I would say if it wasn't for the next faction on our list, I'd say that they're probably the strongest thing in the pack. But I think we're finally starting to come close to that white whale Astartes build that everyone thinks is out there, that's capable of dominating the meta, and I think we're getting close to finding it.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of the next faction, let's talk about Necrons once again.
Yeah, I mean, I said that if I had to make it a list, Asuryani would be 5th. Necrons would be 1st. I mean, even on an open board right now, the way that Novak dominates and just kind of has an answer to everything on what seems like, you could basically say, a single list. Those strengths in open play are amplified like ×2 on Arena. Mm-hmm. It's just so much easier for these Necrons to get locked in combat, and it's just so hard to reliably, take them off the board. And BAO isn't a packet that has super reliable positional secondaries, so you're kind of putting yourself in this position where you might have no choice but to be forced to try and kill Necrons at some point or another.
Yeah.
And that's not something that's not a position you want to put yourself in. I mean, I've played you with my Necrons in the past a lot of times, and you know how kind of frustrating it can be to have to worry about those models.
Yeah, for sure. So many times have I come close to beating those Necrons with Deathwatch, Storm Shield, and Power Sword spam, and it's just they're just so hard to kill, man. That's basically what it comes down to. And in an Arena format, where you can't go 100% positional, it's super difficult to just grate your teeth and just charge into them and just like hope you roll a 5, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it really kind of takes the game out of your hands. I mean, Reanimation Protocol, as far as built-in abilities goes on models, it's the best one in the game.
Yeah.
Any model would trade their best ability for Reanimation Protocols, I think, at the end of the day. It's just punishing, and it's really difficult to deal with. And I mean, we saw Matt Howell dominate with Necrons on the LVO format at the Command Point Invitational, and I wouldn't be surprised to see another one of these Necron players just run the group stage and make a pretty deep run in the bracket yet again.
Yeah. I mean, we started the Command Point Invitational talking about the Necron faction as a whole, and Matt Howell won the Command Point Invitational with Novak Necrons, and I'm honestly sick and tired of talking about Necrons.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they're here, we're gonna have to keep talking about them.
Yeah, it's on us, man. We gotta knock them out.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, anyway, I think those are the top 5 scariest factions to look out for in the BAO packet.
Yeah.
So I guess tune into the streams over the next month and a half, and don't be surprised if you're seeing a lot of dominant Necron play, along with the other factions on this list.